help to turn that around. So there are wonderful programs out there. Our next speaker is Phyllis Chesler. We can't say enough about her work that she's done throughout the world. She's an emerita professor of psychology and women's studies at City University of New York. She's a international best-selling author, a legendary feminist leader, a retired psychotherapist, and an expert court witness. She's lectured and organized political, legal, religious, and human rights campaigns all over the world, the United States, Canada, Europe, Israel, Far East. Her work has been translated into many European languages and into Japanese, Chinese, Korean, and Hebrew. And I introduce you, she will talk on an issue that is very powerful.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes? Okay. I want to dedicate my remarks.
No, can't hear you.
It's not live. It's not live.
Yes, it is.
Can you hear me now? Are you sure?
She can't sing as well, but we'll do that.
I'll sing too, but not now. No, really, is it working? Okay.
Yes.
I want to dedicate these remarks to the work of Nasreen Sotoudeh, the human rights lawyer who represented the women of Iran who dared to collectively remove their hijab, for which she has been sentenced to 148 lashes. One does not survive this. And if she does, to 38 years in jail. And I'm waiting for international women's groups to go and get her out of jail, as well as all the other women in Evin prison and elsewhere. I'm a second wave radical feminist, and I came into my feminist destiny in 1967, both as an activist and an academic. And our original feminist vision was very transformative, and we believed in universal human rights, which I still do, and we envisioned multicultural diversity, not multicultural relativism, which has gotten us in trouble and into glory. We called out misogyny when we saw it, and we didn't exempt a rapist or a wife beater or a pedophile because he was poor. His victims were poor. Or a man of color. His victims were often people of color, women of color, or because he had an abused childhood, so had his victims. Like other American feminists in America, I was active in both the civil rights movement and the anti-war movement. But unlike every other American feminist of my time, I had once lived in a harem in Afghanistan. And this is the opening line of my book, An American Bride in Kabul. Quite unexpectedly, I found myself in a polygamous household in very posh Purdah, which meant I was not allowed out without a male escort. And to my shock, my father-in-law, a powerful man, and a dapper and charming man, like his son whom I married, he had 3 wives and 21 children, and I had to live with my mother-in-law. That was a surprise. And she hated me. The whole family was disappointed because he went, fool that he is, he went and he married an American who's not blonde and doesn't have blue eyes, who could pass for any Afghan woman. You know, what's the point? And all of these facts, my very westernized Afghan husband failed to mention during our 3-year courtship at college. So when I was 20, just 20 years old, I saw for the first time women in burqas, no peripheral vision, suffocating, stumbling around in Kabul. Sensory deprivation, isolation chambers, ambulatory body bags, ghosts, moving prisons. I can't stress this enough. And these ghosts were forced to literally sit at the back of the bus. And this is before Rosa Parks took her stand in the American Civil Rights Movement and refused to move from the whites only section. I never forgot this. I always remembered this, even as I was critiquing American sexism and classism and racism and homophobia and imperial overreach. I understood that the customs I'd observed and endured were indigenous, and they were not caused by the West. That's a very, very important distinction. So when a woman gets stoned to death in Afghanistan or in Iran under Khomeini's rule, under the Taliban's rule, America, Europe didn't this. We didn't say you have to stone them. That's what we recommend. It's a very, very important distinction. In the late 1960s, I escaped, I got out, and it's a gift that keeps giving because I learned so much since I survived. No Westerner who travels east, so to speak, comes out without scars. Dysentery, I had that. Hepatitis, I had that. Malaria, I didn't have that. I was not kidnapped into somebody else's harem. I found myself in one, surprisingly. So I started studying violence against women. When I returned, I focused first on women living in North America and in Europe who had been psychiatrically diagnosed and hospitalized, pathologized, because they were the victims of rape or incest or sexual harassment or domestic violence. And pornography and prostitution were big issues for my honorable wing of the American feminist movement, as well as trafficking. And then in the early 1970s, I was alarmed by what I knew would happen to the girls of Bangladesh who had been gang raped by Pakistani soldiers and whose families would kill them or they would kill themselves. And I suggested we needed a feminist government in exile, we needed feminist Air Force planes to airlift them out to safety. They surely will die. And American feminists, educated and smart, thought I was being merely poetic, metaphoric. By the late 1990s and the 21st century, I was similarly concerned with the fate of kidnapped and sexually enslaved women in North Africa at the hands of paramilitary units, and by the increasing use of gang rape as a weapon, not merely as a spoil of war, in Bosnia, Congo, Rwanda, and Sudan, Guatemala, I mean, everywhere, but definitely in those war zones. So given world events and the increased visibility to us of what was happening around the world, God forbid I should be a bystander in my time on earth, I started focusing on tribal gender and religious apartheid on the lives of women living under Sharia law, but also Hindus in India, also Sikhs in India. I began, and in England to some smaller extent, I began writing about honor-based violence, including honor killing, which is femicide. At the beginning, if you're born female, it's like a capital crime. You have to keep apologizing for it and making certain that that no allegation, however false, can cling to you, that you have dishonored your family. I began, by 2008, I began publishing studies, and this is important, about how honor killings, which I want to call horror killings, I began documenting femicide worldwide among Muslim and Sikh communities in the West, and I've published 4 such studies, and I'm working on a 5th right now, which looks at the variables associated with successfully escaping from being honor killed and what it requires. An honor killing, I'm sure everybody knows what it is. Yes? No? Okay. It's the cold-blooded murder of girls and women, really because they're female. In a shame and honor culture, a girl has to keep proving that she won't talk to a boy, she will keep the veil on, she will be the domestic slave in her family, she will marry her first cousin, she will remain in a very violent and abusive marriage, she will accept marrying a grandfather age to settle a quarrel, a blood debt, and that she will absorb all the violence thrown her way. And the violence is horrific. We cannot in the West comprehend what that violence is like. We really can't. A girl's fertility and reproductive capacity is a commodity that the family owns. She doesn't own it. It belongs to her family. And if she's not a virgin, her shame belongs to them, and they must cleanse their shame with blood, her blood. And you know what the families say? That, you know, they would be cut off. They would be economically devastated and socially ostracized if they did not cleanse their shame, because indeed, it is a communal custom to do so. Now imagine psychologically what it's like growing up in a family where you're closely monitored, humiliated, harassed, beaten daily, threatened with death daily if you're seen talking to a boy, or if you're seen talking to a non-Muslim, or if you dare think of marrying someone out of the wrong caste if you're a Hindu, just in India. Imagine that you know that your family can kill you and get away with it, that there will be no justice for you, and that there will be no place you can escape to. Just think psychologically of the kind of person this creates. When I began this work, I didn't fully understand how hard it would be to make an escape. And because the girls are taught to believe they've been born bad, born evil, born no good. But more important, that without their families, they are nobody. They don't exist in Western terms as individuals. They are the daughter of, the wife of, the sister of, the mother of, otherwise they have no existence. So I published a series of studies. I had to explain how honor killings are not like domestic violence, Western style. There's no way to estimate how many honor killings take place. The UN for the entire 21st century keeps telling us it's 5,000 a year. That's true for the Punjab alone, not for all of Pakistan. And there's no way, it's like incest. These are hidden crimes, buried crimes, crimes that are not prosecuted, but they are increasingly reported. That's new. And sisters, aunts, mothers, brothers, fathers, grandfathers are the perpetrators. I'm skipping for time. As I said, Hindus only perpetrate honor killings for caste-related violations, and only in India. When Indians come to America or to Europe, they don't bring the custom with them. Only Muslims do, and to a very small extent, Sikhs do. And if I say this, oh, that's racist, that's Islamophobic, but it's the truth. It's the truth. And as women, as feminists, we have to really pay attention to what is true. Honor-based violence in general, including honor killing, cannot be justified, really. Think about this. In the name of cultural relativism, or tolerance, or anti-racism, or political correctness, and it is all the time. Who are we to judge? Who are we to criticize? We imperialists, we racists, we white supremacists. Who are we from the outside to come in and say that female genital mutilation is an atrocity with lifelong suffering, if not death? Who are we to say that? Now, in this fifth and still ongoing and still preliminary study, I found that in each and every instance of a successful escape, something in this girl or woman has to take the first step, has to somehow transcend being wounded to take the initiative on her own. And I do not understand why. I've done interviews. In one case, it was a very proud, strong grandmother. But in most cases, I can't tell. I don't know. But once a woman determined to save her life, of those, about 74% who were successful needed and required and got government assistance and legal assistance. And a third of that 74% were helped by either Christian religious networks, if they converted to Christianity, and or by feminist secular networks, NGOs of one kind or another, perhaps government funded, and also freestanding charities. A very, very, very small number survived due to luck, just to sheer luck. And because they had decided that their lives were worth saving. Now, legislators have to be taught that those who flee for honor and who agree to testify against their families, which does happen, they may require lifelong security and may have to live lives under false names. That's difficult and expensive, not an easy life. More than that, if you're talking about a young girl or a traumatized young woman of any age really, you have to find for her an alternative adoptive clan, because she will not know how to survive on her own alone. And this is very difficult to do, because when you put traumatized women all together and hope that they'll be sisterly towards each other, it doesn't always work out that way. It can't, for all kinds of reasons, which we can discuss later. So I can't change at the instance what's happening in Kenya. I'd like to, but I can't. Or in Congo, even more so. Or Afghanistan or Pakistan. But in the West, if we want to save women here from being honor killed, here, because it is in the West, we have to pass strong legislation, but we have to also enforce the legislation. We have to educate police officers, lawyers, judges, social workers, physicians, and teachers. When a little girl who wears a veil comes in with a black eye, it's not the same as a non-Muslim girl not wearing a veil coming in with a black eye, because that black eye often means she's being beaten daily and threatened and death threatened, and it could be that her brother is outside the school to make sure that she's not going to let the veil slip, take it off, which often is the case, or talk to a boy, an infidel, make an infidel friend who's a girl. And we will have to pay for that if we value the lives of women and if we don't want their blood on our hands. Thank you.